Hey, it's Talbot Davis again, the pastor at Good Shepherd United Methodist Church, and I am so glad that you have grabbed this material that we've prepared for you. You've gathered together with family, you've gathered together with friends, you've gathered together in a life group, and together you are growing in your living relationship with Jesus Christ. This time, of course, you're doing it under that broader headline of the Jesus effect. What is the effect of Jesus, the impact of Jesus on those people he encounters on the way to the cross and all the way through to the resurrection? And we get to dig into a really interesting story, a post-resurrection story from John chapter 20 in just a little bit. But before we get there, I've been thinking about a couple of things. I wanted to sort of process them with you, and because I realized that one of the real tragedies of life, the real disappointments of life, is unreached potential. You know what that's like. You have known people in your life. You've known folks who had all kinds of athletic potential, and yet nerves got in the way, and they never became quite as good a player as they could have been. Maybe you've even had kids who had academic potential, but they never applied themselves, and they never did anywhere near as well as they could have done. Or maybe it's even you, and you've sensed that you've had professional potential, but through a variety of factors, things have gotten in the way, and you find yourself today sort of underemployed, feeling like you're working below your abilities and your capacities. It is unreached, unmet potential. And as I've thought about potential and how to make sure there's not a gap between who you could have been and who you really were, it occurs to me that we really need someone who will call that potential out of us. I know of two that happened at very, very different stages in my life, but what they said in those moments still resonates. One time I was 11 years old, and I went to some kind of little tennis camp down in Austin, Texas. And a coach from Australia who actually got mad at me a couple of times because I wasn't always compliant. I know you can't believe that, but at the end of one of our practice sessions, he just said to me, "You've got so much potential, and I want to see you reach it." And all of a sudden, I go from 11-year-old brat to thinking I can be 12-year-old somebody because this guy saw potential in me. Move ahead quite a few years, and I'm in grad school and moving towards ministry, and I have never preached a sermon in my life. The very first sermon I ever gave was in what they call preaching class at seminary. And the way that it worked was that you would give the sermon to the class, you'd prepare the sermon, deliver it to the class. It was videotaped long enough ago that it was on a VHS tape. And then you get with the professor and in his office, and you watch the tape together, and he evaluates you. And as we were about halfway through, me and the professor his name was Jerry Mercer, and we were evaluating that first sermon, and he didn't know I'd never given a sermon of any kind at any level anywhere before, and he just stopped the tape, and he said, "I simply want you to know that there's a gift there, and I want to be able to help call it out of you because you want to steward that gift well." And that may or may not have been an accurate assessment, but all I know is that whatever ability, whatever potential that I had inside, he called out. And if you've had any season in your life where you feel like, yeah, I reached my potential athletically, academically, professionally, relationally, it was because someone called it out of you. And I think that's so much of what happened to Thomas in the Bible. In John chapter 20, Thomas, who has one of the most unfortunate and inaccurate nicknames of them all, he's called Doubting Thomas, if you know. And the reason that I believe he had something called out of him is because I believe that Thomas was doubting Jesus. See, all the other disciples had seen Jesus risen from the dead. Thomas wasn't with them at that moment. And I believe that Thomas didn't so much doubt Jesus, Thomas doubted Thomas. That doubting Jesus was really a camouflage for all the self-doubt that he was carrying around. Well, the rest of Thomas's story that's beyond the Bible. It's incredible. I'm not going to tell it to you now. You're going to hear it in the actual message, but it is incredible. And it lets you know that when Jesus erased those doubts that Thomas had about Jesus, but even more about Thomas, he did so that he could release that potential. And there is a reason, Good Shepherd friends, there is a reason that all over the world there are cathedrals named after not doubting Thomas, but after Saint Thomas. I pray you have a great conversation, and that in the middle of that conversation, all the potential that Jesus has loaded up in you gets unleashed.